The rain had been falling since morning, the kind that didn't rage but lingered, as if the sky itself had grown tired and needed somewhere to pour its quiet sorrow. The streets were slick with reflections of yellow lights, and people hurried past one another without meeting eyes, each lost inside their own silent battles. Emma stood outside the small grocery store with trembling hands. Her coat was thin, and the rain had already soaked through the sleeves. She clutched a few crumpled bills, counting them again and again, even though she already knew the truth. It wasn't enough. Inside the store, warm light glowed through the glass windows. Shelves were stacked with food, bread, milk, and fruit, things most people picked up without a second thought. But for Emma, each item felt like a decision between survival and surrender. Her son Daniel was waiting at home, 11 years old, thin, too quiet for a child his age. He hadn't complained when she told him dinner might be late. He rarely complained about anything anymore. Emma pushed the door open. The warm air inside the store wrapped around her like a brief moment of mercy. She walked slowly through the aisles, picking up only the things she believed they truly needed. A loaf of bread, a small carton of milk, a can of soup. Her fingers hesitated over the apples. Daniel loved apples. She picked one up, turning it slowly in her hand, then placed it back. At the counter, the cashier began scanning the items. Beep, beep, beep. The sound felt louder than it should have. "That'll be $12.40, the cashier said. Emma placed the crumpled bills on the counter. $8. Her throat tightened. I'm sorry, she whispered. Could you remove the soup? The cashier sighed and removed it. Beep. $10.20. Emma swallowed hard. Maybe the milk too. A few people in line shifted impatiently behind her. She could feel their eyes. The milk disappeared from the counter. Now only the bread remained. $4.80, the cashier said. Emma pushed the money forward, trying to hide the way her hands were shaking. Behind her, someone stepped forward. A man in a dark coat. His voice was calm but firm. Keep everything. Emma turned, startled. The man placed a $20 bill on the counter. For the groceries, he said. Emma stared at him, stunned. You don't have to do that, she said quickly, her voice almost breaking. I know, he replied gently, but I want to. There was something quiet about him, not the kind of quiet that came from shyness, but from someone who had seen too much of life. The cashier finished the transaction and handed Emma the bag. She held it like it was something fragile. Thank you, she said softly. The man nodded once. She turned to leave, but something inside her made her stop. Why? She asked. The man looked at her for a long moment, because once someone did the same for me. Then he walked out into the rain. Emma stood there for a moment, her heart strangely heavy and light at the same time. That night, Daniel smiled for the first time in days when she placed the apple beside his bowl of soup. Where did you get the apple? He asked. A kind stranger, she said. Daniel took a bite and grinned. Then he must be a hero. Emma smiled faintly, but she wondered about the man, about the quiet sadness she had seen in his eyes. Across town, the man sat alone in a small apartment. His name was Michael. He placed his keys on the table and looked at an old photograph resting beside the lamp. A little girl with bright eyes and messy hair. His daughter, Lily. She had loved apples, too. 5 years had passed since the accident, but the silence in his apartment still felt as loud as thunder. After Lily died, Michael had stopped noticing people, stopped caring about the world beyond his grief. But tonight, something had changed. Seeing Emma count those crumpled bills had stirred a memory. He thought he had buried forever. The day he couldn't afford medicine for Lily. The day a stranger had stepped forward. Michael leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Maybe kindness didn't erase pain, but maybe it kept pain from spreading. The next morning, Emma woke early. She sat at the kitchen table watching Daniel eat the last slice of bread. I'm going to find a job today, she told him. Daniel nodded with quiet faith. I know you will. Emma spent the day walking through the city, stepping into store after store. Most places weren't hiring. Some didn't even let her finish her sentence before shaking their heads. By late afternoon, exhaustion pressed down on her shoulders. Then she saw a small sign in the window of a bookstore. Help wanted. Inside, the smell of paper and coffee filled the air. Behind the counter stood the same man from the grocery store. Michael looked up in surprise. Emma froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael smiled slightly. "Looking for a job?" She nodded slowly. "Then you're in luck," he said. Emma blinked. "You mean—" "I need someone who understands how much small things matter," he said quietly. And just like that, something began. Weeks turned into months. Emma worked hard. Daniel spent afternoons sitting in the corner of the bookstore, reading adventure stories. And Michael slowly found himself smiling again, not because the past had changed, but because the future no longer felt empty. One evening, Daniel walked up to Michael holding a book. "Mr. Michael," he said, "Mom says heroes are people who help when no one else does." Michael chuckled softly. "That sounds about right." Daniel thought for a moment. "Then you're a hero." Michael looked at the boy, then at Emma across the store. For the first time in years, the ache in his chest didn't feel like something that would destroy him. It felt like something that had taught him how deeply a heart could care. Outside, the rain had stopped, and somewhere, beyond the clouds, the sky was finally beginning to clear. The night bus rattled through the empty streets like a tired animal that had forgotten where it was going. The city lights blurred across the rain-streaked windows, stretching into long golden lines that disappeared into darkness. Noah sat near the back, staring at his reflection in the glass. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. 3 months ago he had a job, a small apartment, and a future that seemed simple and predictable. Nothing extraordinary, but enough to believe life would keep moving forward. Then the company closed. One email, one meeting, one quiet moment where everything collapsed. Since then, days had blurred together. Rejection emails, phone calls that never came, long walks just to avoid sitting in the silence of his empty apartment. Tonight he had finally given up. The bus ticket in his pocket was won, way to a town hundreds of miles away, where a friend had promised temporary work at a warehouse. It wasn't the life Noah imagined for himself, but it was something. Still, the weight in his chest refused to lift. Across the aisle sat an old man in a worn grey coat. His hair was thin and silver, and he held a small notebook in his hands. Every few minutes he wrote something, paused, then stared out the window as if searching for answers in the darkness. After a while, the bus stopped at a quiet station on the edge of the city. The driver announced a short break. Passengers slowly stepped out into the cold night air. Noah remained seated, rubbing his tired eyes. The old man stood up carefully and walked toward him. "Mind if I sit here when we get back?" he asked. Noah shrugged. "Sure." A few minutes later, they were both back on the bus. The engine growled to life again. The old man opened his notebook but didn't write. Instead, he glanced at Noah. "You look like someone who's running away," he said calmly. Noah frowned slightly. "That obvious?" The old man smiled faintly. "I've seen that look before." Noah leaned back in his seat. "Maybe I am running away?" "From what?" "From failing." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The old man didn't react immediately. He nodded slowly, as if the answer made perfect sense. "What did you lose?" he asked. "My job," Noah replied. "My plans. My confidence." The old man tapped his pen lightly against the notebook. "That's a lot." They rode in silence for a while as the bus moved deeper into the night. Finally, Noah asked, "What are you writing in that notebook?" "Stories," the old man said. "Stories about what?" "People." Noah chuckled softly. "People aren't very interesting when they're failing." The old man turned toward him. "That's where the best stories begin." Noah didn't respond. The old man closed the notebook. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Sure." "When I was 30, I lost everything." Noah glanced at him. The old man continued. "I owned a small restaurant. It was my dream. My father helped me build it. Every table, every chair, every recipe." He paused. "Then one night there was a fire." Noah felt his chest tighten slightly. "The whole place burned down," the old man said quietly. "Insurance problems, debt, lawsuits. Within 6 months I had nothing left." "What did you do?" Noah asked. The old man smiled faintly. "I thought my life was over. Outside the window, the city lights had faded. Now only dark highways stretched ahead. For a year, the old man continued, I worked random jobs, washing dishes, delivering packages, sleeping in a tiny room above a mechanic's shop. That sounds awful, Noah said. It was, the old man admitted, but something strange happened. What? I started noticing people. Noah raised an eyebrow. I had spent years inside my restaurant, focused only on success, profit, growth, reputation, but when everything disappeared, I suddenly had time to see the world differently. The old man tapped his notebook. That's when I started writing. You became a writer? Noah asked. Eventually. What changed? The old man looked out the window. One night I met a man sleeping on a park bench. He had lost his family in an accident years before. He told me something I never forgot. What did he say? He said pain doesn't mean life is over. It means life is asking you to become someone new. Noah let those words settle in his mind. The bus hummed quietly along the road. Did you believe him? Noah asked. Not at first, the old man said. But over time I realized something. What? Every person who had ever inspired me had one thing in common. They succeeded, Noah guessed. The old man shook his head. They failed. Noah stared at him. Failure forces you to look at yourself honestly, the old man continued. It strips away illusions. The bus slowed slightly as it passed through a small town. Dim lights flickered past the windows. What's your name? Noah asked. Samuel. Noah. Samuel nodded. Tell me something, Noah. What did you dream of before everything went wrong? Noah hesitated. Then he sighed. I wanted to open a small design studio. Samuel's eyes brightened slightly. Creative work? Yeah. Why didn't you? I needed money first, Noah replied. Experience, stability? Samuel smiled knowingly. And when you finally had stability? Noah looked down. I got comfortable. Samuel leaned back in his seat. That happens to most people. Noah felt a strange mix of frustration and relief. So what's the lesson here? He asked. That losing everything is good? Samuel chuckled softly. No, losing everything hurts. But sometimes it clears the path you were too afraid to walk. Noah stared at the passing darkness outside. What if I fail again? He asked quietly. Samuel opened his notebook and flipped to a blank page. Then you'll learn again. He tore out the page and handed it to Noah. On it was a simple sentence. The worst prison is the life you stay in because you are afraid to begin again. Noah read the words twice. Did you write that? He asked. Samuel nodded. The bus grew quieter as more passengers fell asleep. After a while, Samuel spoke again. You said you're heading to a warehouse job. Yeah. Do you want that life? No. Then why take it? Because I need money. Samuel leaned closer. How much? Noah thought for a moment. Not much, actually. Just enough to survive while figuring things out. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. You know, he said, the town where this bus stops next has a small art market every weekend. Noah looked confused. People sell paintings, crafts, designs, photography. So? Samuel smiled. So why not start there? Noah laughed quietly. Selling designs at a market stand? Why not? It sounds small. Samuel closed his notebook again. Small beginnings create powerful lives. The bus slowed as it approached the next station. Samuel stood up and gathered his coat. This is my stop. Noah felt unexpectedly disappointed. Thanks for the conversation, he said. Samuel nodded. Remember something, Noah. What? The world rarely changes your life in one dramatic moment. He tapped the notebook gently. It changes in small decisions. Samuel stepped off the bus. The door closed. The bus began moving again. Noah looked down at the page Samuel had given him. The sentence stared back at him. The worst prison is the life you stay in because you are afraid to begin again. 10 minutes later, Noah stood up suddenly. He walked to the driver. Excuse me, he said. Yes? Can you stop at the next town? The driver glanced at him in the mirror. Sure. An hour later, Noah stepped off the bus into a quiet town, lit by warm street lamps. The air smelled fresh and cold. He looked around, unsure of what came next. But for the first time in months, the weight inside his chest felt lighter. He found a small motel and rented the cheapest room. That night he barely slept. Ideas rushed through his mind. Sketches, logos, designs. By morning, he had filled 3 pages with concepts. On Saturday, he rented a tiny table at the art market. At first, people barely noticed him. Then a young woman stopped to look at his designs. "These are really good," she said. She bought one. Then another customer came. Then another. By the end of the day, Noah had earned enough to cover the table fee and his motel room. But more importantly, he had something else. Hope. Weeks passed. His small table turned into a booth. His booth turned into online orders. And one afternoon, months later, Noah opened the door to his own tiny studio. On the wall above his desk, he pinned the page Samuel had given him. Sometimes when work was quiet, he would read it again. He never saw Samuel after that night. But Noah often wondered if the old man somehow knew exactly what he needed to hear. Years later, when young designers came to Noah for advice, he would tell them the same thing Samuel had told him. Pain doesn't mean life is over. Sometimes it means life is asking you to become someone new. And every time he said those words, Noah remembered the night bus, the quiet road, and the stranger who changed the direction of his life with nothing more than a conversation and a single sentence written on a torn piece of paper.